If it's Friday, more breaking news. White House and Pentagon officials revealed just moments ago that a second flying object about the size of a car was shot down in U.S. airspace this afternoon. We'll get the latest details about what we know and a lot of what we don't know ahead. Plus, entitlement fights and political peril. President Biden puts Republicans on the defense over the question of cuts to Medicare and Social Security, and it makes it clear how far Republicans have strayed from their party roots. And the death toll in Turkey and Syria tops 23,000, while survivors are still being pulled from the rubble nearly 5 days after this catastrophic earthquake shattered cities and millions of lives. Happy Friday. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd reporting from Washington, where we begin today with the breaking news about a second object being shot down over U.S. airspace in Alaska. Moments ago, the National Security Council coordinator, John Kirby, speaking from the podium in the White House briefing room, confirmed that the U.S. began tracking this object yesterday and then shot it down at a high altitude, flying over Alaskan airspace this afternoon.
The Department of Defense was tracking a high-altitude object over Alaska airspace in the last 24 hours. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. Out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of the Pentagon, President Biden ordered the military to down the object. And they did, and it came inside our territorial waters. Those waters right now are frozen, but inside territorial airspace and over territorial waters. Fighter aircraft assigned to U.S. Northern Command took down the object within the last hour.
Both the White House and the Pentagon this afternoon said they believe the primary threat, as you heard there, was to civilian aircraft, and that the U.S. does not know who owns the object, and that it's and they don't know what the full purpose of the object was just yet.
We're calling this an object because that's the best description we have right now. We do not know who owns it, whether it's state-owned or corporate-owned or privately owned. We just don't know.
Yeah, so at this point, we don't know the origin of the object. Again, we will know more once we're able to potentially recover some of those materials. But the primary concern, again, was the potential hazard to civil flight.
Just yesterday, Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski called on the United States to shoot down future objects that enter the Alaskan airspace.
I think we need to recognize that the airspace over the state of Alaska, over our territorial waters, is U.S. airspace. And so if it's appropriate to take it down off of the East Coast in U.S. airspace, it is also equally appropriate to take it down off of Alaskan.
Now, Kirby also noted some stark differences between the object that they shot down today and the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down nearly a week ago off the coast of the Carolinas. The second object was much smaller than the spy's balloon, about the size of a car. It flew at a much lower altitude, 40,000 feet versus 60,000 feet. And the initial assessment is that this second object was not manned. I guess that means you can start to wonder if it was a drone. So joining me now is NBC's Dan DeLuce from the Pentagon and White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, I want to start with sort of an interesting aspect of this, and that is the fact that the White House brought John Kirby out to make an announcement about a trip to Poland and waited for a reporter to question the White House until we found this out. It just seemed like an odd way to disclose this information.
That was one of my major takeaways too, Chuck, and I think if we rewind here to the reason we all learned about the initial Chinese surveillance balloon is because of the reporting of our great colleague Courtney Kube. It raises a whole lot of questions about what the White House and the Pentagon sometimes isn't prepared to want to disclose until the media is going to report about it or until reporters start to ask those very important questions. So yes, it was also in the middle of this briefing with a top White House national security spokesperson where somebody asked kind of casually, there's a rumor about another high-flying object over Alaska. Can you confirm that? And then you saw John Kirby there take out a very carefully prepared statement, read from it, confirm it, and then it exploded into, of course, 95 follow-up questions that all of my great colleagues in the White House press corps also had. Among them, and things we still don't know, to your point, who owns this aircraft. But we did learn a little bit more about the timeline here, and I think this is what becomes a little bit interesting politically, because we know that the Chinese balloon really flew across the United States for days, captivating the nation before it was shot down over water. We're told the president learned about this other object, which again is much smaller. It is about the size of a small car, we understand. He learned about it last night. He made a decision this morning to take it out of the sky, and then it was really just early this afternoon that actually happened. So this whole military operation on a very shrunk down timeline compared to what we saw in the entirety of last week with the other balloon that was 200 feet tall, and the satellite portion was the size of a regional jet. So again, we're talking about different things, and we still don't have a total picture of this other thing that was shot down over those frozen waters. So hopefully they'll be able to recover a lot of it and tell us more in the days ahead.
And Dan, I know you were on the Pentagon side of this briefing. It sounds as if they started tracking this before it entered American airspace. Is that fair to say? And so was this one of those, if it does go into our airspace, we're shooting it down, or was that decision made after it entered our airspace?
They're suggesting that the decision came after it entered U.S. airspace. At 45,000 feet, the one thing they're emphasizing is that's the altitude that civilian aircraft travel at, unlike that Chinese balloon that was much higher above where civilian aircraft fly. But what was bizarre at this press conference, if you saw it, you know, they could not say how fast it was traveling. They couldn't explain how fighter jet pilots and aircraft could figure out at least that there was no one on it. It was not manned. But then they couldn't tell us exactly what was this object. So we're literally talking about a UFO. I think they're trying to be careful until they figure out exactly what it was. But there is this contrast now, right? Because in the first incident, they did not shoot down what they believed was a Chinese balloon when it was over the Pacific Ocean, over the West Coast. And they waited till it got all the way to the East Coast. In this case, they shot something down that, you know, was not a Chinese surveillance balloon. At least they haven't said it was yet. So it's very confusing. It's much smaller. I think there's a distinct possibility they will say this is a balloon, but stay tuned.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it looks to have been traveling very slowly. And they said it was unmanned. And just the way they're describing it seems to suggest that. I'm speculating, but that's a distinct possibility here. And
Monica, did they seem at all to suggest it was maneuverable and that they knew it was being guided in some way?
Well, according to, again, I'll call in Courtney, who was just talking about this a little bit ago, and I defer to her expertise. They did believe it was moving in a strange direction. It was moving somewhere that wouldn't track with what you would normally see something like this, a high-flying object, and so that raised some questions, and that again suggests perhaps this is a similar balloon. But they didn't provide a lot more details beyond that. And I can also say the president was just asked about this in his meeting with the Brazilian president at the White House. He just welcomed him, and the only comment he offered was that it was a great success. So it seems that they're pleased with how this all went, though again there are still questions about how it went down, and again some of the differences with what we saw in the last week.
And Dan, you know, last week they at least let us know that they had sent fighter jets up to observe the balloon, that they had an idea. They sort of made a lot of estimate, and it was clearly that it was, you know, they had sent some jets up to see. One would assume they did the same thing with this object, and yet they've given us very little detail here.
That's right, and they moved much faster. It was a much swifter kind of chain of events, right? Because in this case, they spotted it yesterday. They sent up aircraft to take a look, and then they ordered up this F-22 to take it out with a Sidewinder missile. And of course, the last time they said, oh, we were collecting intelligence on that Chinese balloon the whole time, and that was to the U.S. advantage. And that was another question today. Well, why didn't you wait and collect more intelligence on this? And their answer was, well, this was at that altitude where civilian aircraft travel. But, you know, we don't know what this is. This could have been some kind of research or weather balloon for all we know. We really have almost no information at the moment.
Monica Alba, Dan DeLuce, this has actually not cleared things up. I think we have only more questions with this strange way that they briefed the public on this. Thank you both. We're obviously going to continue to keep an eye on this piece of breaking news. We'll continue to bring any new developments. It sounds like we're owed a lot more explanation here. We're going to turn now to a little bit of politics, where it turns out the President's State of the Union address was not just a one-day event. The buzzy moment from the President's address has proven to have at least a few days of legs, and in the process, it's sweeping the legs out from underneath Republicans on the issue of entitlements. President Biden spent the week looking to capitalize on that surprise consensus over Social Security and Medicare that he wrung from the GOP in an unscripted moment on Tuesday night.
Modernizing our military. Some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. So, folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be stopped. All right. I'm ready. We got unanimity.
President Biden took that moment and that momentum with him on his post-State of the Union roadshow. First in Wisconsin on Wednesday, and sticking to his message Thursday in Florida, the home state of his key foil on this issue of Medicare and Social Security, Senator Rick Scott.
They seem shocked when I raised the plans of some of their members and their caucus to cut Social Security. Rick Scott from Florida, the guy who ran the U.S. Senate campaign, has a plan. I got his brochure right here. The very idea the senator from Florida wants to put Social Security and Medicare in the chopping block every 5 years, I find to be somewhat outrageous. I know that a lot of Republicans, their dream is to cut Social Security and Medicare. Well, let me say this. If that's your dream, I'm your nightmare.
The messaging blitz comes amid a real and looming concern about the solvency of at least Medicare for sure, let alone, of course, Social Security as we all continue to live longer. But it's been a political boon for the president on the cusp of a 2024 re-election campaign, leaving Republicans scrambling a bit and on the defensive on this issue. Senator Mitch McConnell, who Scott challenged for leadership last year, distanced himself and the Republican Party from the Florida senator in a radio interview yesterday.
Well, unfortunately, that was the Scott plan. That's not a Republican plan. That was the Rick Scott plan. Speaker McCarthy said Social Security and Medicare are not to be touched, and I've said the same. And I think we're in a more authoritative position to state what the position of the party is than any single senator.
Both Biden and McConnell are referencing a 12-point plan that Scott released last year while chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. It reads, quote, all federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. Now, Scott acknowledges that point was part of the proposal, but he is adamant that it does not mean he wants to cut Social Security or Medicare. And at an event with seniors in Florida today, he accused McConnell of supporting Biden, telling local reporters, this is what he's doing. He's backing up Biden again. He doesn't believe we ought to have a plan. This week and this fight is a stark reminder of both just how potent entitlements are in our politics and just how completely Republicans have surrendered this mantle of fiscal responsibility that was once a pillar of this party. Joining me now is our panel, NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli, USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page, Naveen Nayak, President and Executive Director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Danielle Pletka, a Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and an NBC News contributor. And you really kept your discipline. Your exasperation, your size. I can't wait to get to you on this. But Mike, I sit here, and if Anita Dunn could have designed a fallout, this is exact. I mean, you pick your enemy sometimes. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rick Scott have both been helping the White House take what was, I think, a good night and turned it into something more.
First of all, can we just step back a moment and appreciate when's the last time we've had a good old-fashioned policy debate between one party and the other?
Are they debating anything, actually?
That's a good question, but for the last 2 years, it's all been Democrats versus Democrats on policy, and then there's the Trump era, which is a whole separate story. But this speaks to one of the things, really two strategic objectives of the White House. Chuck, you and I hear all the time the White House saying the issues that you're talking about or obsessed with are not the issues that the American people care about, the people who will decide elections care about.
They care about resort fees.
They care about, they do actually. They care about airline fees, and they care about Social Security and Medicare. And so the president has baited the other party into an actual policy fight here. So that's one objective. The other is to divide and conquer. I mean, the president says he wants to unite the country. That's been hard for him. So it's easy to divide Republicans. And that's been obvious this entire year so far. There's a reason Mitch McConnell was with President Biden at a bridge at the moment that Kevin McCarthy was trying to win a speakership vote. And so this week he took maybe even a page out of the Republican playbook. Let's pick an extreme position in the other party and then let the rest of the party try to fight it out. This is really part of the 2024 strategy too, which is show that not all the party maybe is the MAGA wing, but they still are defined by the MAGA wing.
Susan, it really did remind me a bit of how Republicans effectively took defund the police and painted the entire party with it. And you'd have Democrats scream almost the way Republicans, no, no, no. And you're like, yeah, well, that's welcome to the NFL.
And it worked.
And it worked.
It worked. It hurt Democrats who never wanted to defund the police.
Right.
And this is hurting Republicans who have no intention of cutting Medicare or Social Security. Any day that the White House can have Republicans saying, we don't want to cut these, stop talking about this, and arguing with each other, that is a great day for Joe Biden.
Danny, I want to get to what are the three, remember the three legs of the stool? What happened to these? There's only one leg left. It's just social issues. It's culture issues.
It's just stool. Let's just face it.
You think it's just on the floor now? Well, all the legs are gone.
Well, it has another meaning, too.
There's a divide. I mean, national defense, there's a divide on that in this party, right? We know this. And I understand being afraid of Social Security and Medicare is an issue. But now it seems like the party, okay, fine. It's a total walk away, is it not?
But look, I mean, you know, you said this is a good day for Joe Biden. This is all gross. And I know we can agree on this, no matter where we stand on the political spectrum. I work at a think tank, you work at a think tank. We're nerds. One of my colleagues, Andrew Biggs, had a really good piece in Forbes today. He laid it out. We spent last year $1.2 trillion, right, on Social Security, $726 billion on Medicare. By 2050, I know Joe Biden won't care what happens in 2050, but it'll be $4.7 trillion. This is something we have to talk about. You're going to get that money that your kids are paying for. I'm going to get that money that our kids are paying for. Maybe our political leaders could have a serious conversation instead of going, oh, owned you, loser. Right? I mean, that's what's sad about this.
It is. Look,
sorry
Democrats
to inject policy.
No. What's interesting here is the Democratic Party's moved on this. I mean, Barack Obama was ready to negotiate on these issues.
Well,
and Joe Biden's like, nope, we're done.
Well, I mean, I think the contrast he's drawing is between what Rick Scott has put out there, and then let's be honest, Rick Scott is the most compelling foil, but Ron Johnson just this week doubled down, tripled down, saying no, I don't think it should be every 5 years. I think it should be every year, and we should make this a program that Congress has to reauthorize every year. And then you do have the Republican Study Committee has approved a budget that's 75% of the last Congress of Republicans who do want to cut Social Security and make Medicare a voucher. So I actually don't know that. I think what's actually happening here is they're realizing how unpopular these policies are. Not that they actually don't really support them, to your point. I think they actually do believe this is what needs to happen. I just think they're recognizing just how unpopular it is.
People like money.
Yeah. I want to, look.
I pay for some of these benefits.
I want to pivot here back to the balloon here a minute, because I do think, Susan, and we've been around here a long time, there's a lot of CYA going on. And I think that this is, everybody takes a moment like this and thinks, okay, team red, team blue. And I think this is a case where it's team bureaucracy. Yeah. Right? And I think that at some point here, and I do think you're starting to see members of Congress go, wait a minute. Brian Schatz is one of them. Like, nobody wants to, I think there's a feeling that we're not being told everything. And today's briefing is just proof of it.
Not a feeling. What if nobody had asked about the balloon? Would Kirby gone ahead and announced that we had just shot down something else from the sky? Yeah. There's even when you don't know everything, if you're in charge of the United States government, if you're the president, you have an obligation to keep Americans informed about what's going on, especially when it comes to national security.
We shot down a fighter jet. How do you not make that? Look, I got two pieces of news to start my briefing with. The president's going to Poland. Okay. Yeah. Look, we shot down. Why wait for a question?
And in the wake of last week, where they were also not transparent, we had to have people in Montana say, what is that thing up in the sky, before the administration told us what it was. That's not the way things are supposed to work.
Mike, you're our Bidenologist here. What's this about?
I think what the White House is really struggling with here is, and Dan laid this out a little bit, the different treatment between these two situations, right? Well, originally it was, yeah, I ordered it shot down out of the sky and I was told to wait, and the White House was spinning that how much we learned by tracking the balloon as it, traveled over the U.S. airspace and then dramatically brought it down. In this case, they were quicker with the trigger finger, it sounds like. And I think it speaks to the political reality that they weren't quite as prepared for, perhaps, as they should have been. The reaction to the balloon last week did overhang the State of the Union walk-up in a way that really wasn't welcome at the White House. And so I think now the posture seems to be shoot first and maybe ask questions later, and there's an awful lot of them.
Danny, you're very familiar with the bureaucracy of the intel community back in the day, and sometimes this is not partisan, sometimes this is
incompetence,
turf, right? And a little bit of turf protection, even too. What do you sense is going on here?
I suspect they didn't think it was a big deal, and then they realized that other people did think it was a big deal, and then they realized that it made them look really weak. And I hate to tell everybody, and I know I'm not revealing anything classified, but from space, we can see your license plate. Yeah. How the hell did we not know what this was? How did we not know what the car thing was today?
I think they got under our radar. It looks clear to me that they were in the dark for 3 or 4 years on this program.
But the message this sends to the Chinese and the way we've handled it is so bad. And I say that not as a partisan matter at all. If it had been a Republican president, it also would have been bad. We're not on our game.
Yeah, and I think, the fact that this has been going on for many years, as I think is sort of an indictment of a lot of administrations and a lot of the infrastructure. I do think there might be a less cynical reason in this case too, which is if they are giving a pretty credible answer, at least on the altitude being a potential risk versus the altitude last time, and until we hear otherwise,
it was closer over water too this time.
Right, I think there was an opportunity to shoot it down. So I don't know that we have to be fully cynical about the answers, but I appreciate.
No, it is sort of. I guess it's the way they dribbled it out, and that's what's been here.
You want us to be less cynical. Yeah. Tell us what's going on in real time.
Except that the same thing happens, which is, they don't have all the answers yet either, and so the minute they announce something, they don't know what it is.
You don't have to keep saying, I don't know.
But they said, this is the problem.
I don't know. I didn't know.
Inevitably, the minute they announce it, there are more questions, and when the answer is, I don't know, that feels like stonewalling or distrust, and I actually think they may not know yet or clearly are not ready to answer.
But what this has done is, speaking of unity, it's brought the country together on getting tougher on China, and I do think we're headed into, it does seem as if that China is now, at least diplomatically, not going to work with us right now.
Well, this is what's so significant, was the Blinken trip was in the sort of lane of we're trying to repair the relationship again. Things obviously, especially with the president's own comments about Taiwan on multiple trips to Asia last year, were at a heightened level of tension. This was supposed to be a part of, all right, let's...
By the way, McCarthy's going to go to Taiwan soon. And he kind of has to, and that's only going to create more problems.
And what's interesting is the White House actually thinks that Taiwan is not as interested in bringing McCarthy over the way that they were welcoming Speaker Pelosi, because they recognize that when the dust-up that was caused by the Pelosi visit led China to have to respond in such a public way that raised the concern level so high. They're not sure that China can react even less to a new speaker coming the same way this time. And so there's a lot of concern about this potential visit in the White House.
Mike Pence being subpoenaed, Susan.
Yeah.
Significant?
Yeah. The former vice president, a presidential hopeful, is being subpoenaed to testify in a matter involving the former president, also a presidential.
Wouldn't it have been weird if he hadn't been subpoenaed in this investigation?
Well, it's not surprising, but it's important, and it's probably a sign that this investigation, this inquiry, is pretty well along. You'd think they would go after Pence when they had talked to everybody lower ranking than Pence was.
Danny, if you were Trump, would you try to fight this on executive privilege or just let this go?
He's tried to fight it on executive privilege. He's tried to fight everything on executive privilege. It's been a losing battle all along. I don't think that's the game Mike Pence plays. Anyone who's read his book.
Well, he wouldn't do it. No, I don't think he would do it, but Trump's lawyers could still try to.
Well, they could try, but they haven't exactly had a great success rate so far. So I suspect that he's just going to continue playing the same game he's playing now.
And Naveen, we heard from Biden this week on his classified documents. Now we found another. Sounds like one piece of paper at Pence's house. It does look as if what was found with Pence and Biden is different than Trump, but does that matter anymore?
Yes, I actually do think this will.
Well, I think it should matter. Do you think it will?
I think it will. I think the decorum of the vice president and of President Biden handling this, the fact that it has been cooperative, is actually going to be an easier thing for the American people to understand versus the combative way in which Trump stonewalled not only the National Archives, stonewalled the Department of Justice, the need for a raid. You know, I think that's going to be an easy distinction.
But don't we think that maybe both Biden and Pence will get charged with misdemeanors, Susan? Like, you know, everybody else that mishandles classified, you know, there is sort of intent that usually doesn't matter. Now, how hard they go after you.
Well, I think that would be newsworthy if they get charged.
Well, they can't touch Biden until after he leaves office.
Right.
I think they could like sort of.
I don't think that's I don't think that is. I would not say that is guaranteed to happen. I do think.
If you're going to go after Trump, don't you have to do that?
I think that what happens is not that it puts Biden and Pence in more peril. I think it puts Trump in less peril. Yeah. I think it becomes harder to act against Trump unless you go after everybody despite the distinctions you were just mentioning.
But the origin of this, of course, is not Trump or Pence or Biden. It's Hillary Clinton. And they didn't go after her for her secret server. So how can they go after her?
As somebody who's probably seen more classified info than anybody here, do we overclassify?
Yes. We absolutely do. Now, that doesn't mean that the rules don't apply to the President of the United States. But do we overclassify? I'm going to tell you all something classified that I read once. It was that there was a new uniform in a particular military, and the women in the military did not like it. And
that was considered
that was classified. And come for me, people. Come for me. But that was classified. Right. They don't know when to stop.
Mike, Susan, Naveen, Danny, what a terrific panel. What a weird news day. Thank you all. Up next, 117 hours after that massive quake in Turkey and Syria, emergency workers are still searching for survivors and are still finding them. We're live from the earthquake disaster zone in Turkey next. Plus, even before the announcement that another object was shot down, it was a busy day at the White House. The president of Brazil is there right now after dozens of the nation's governors were there this morning. One of the governors who was in that room will join me on this set in a few minutes. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The death toll out of Turkey and Syria just keeps rising, now topping 23,000 as earthquake rescue and recovery operations continue for a fifth straight day. Emergency services and international aid workers continue to race against the clock, and some frigid winter temperatures to find anyone who could still be alive under the rubble. Obviously, those chances diminish with every day that goes by, but we're still seeing some live miraculous rescues. Members of the London Fire Brigade were able to rescue a woman in Hatay, Turkey, yesterday after she spent 4 days trapped beneath rubble. And in this emotional video, a 17-year-old boy is reunited with his mother after surviving over 96 hours trapped in a basement of a collapsed apartment building near the epicenter of the quake. For many survivors, the priority now is simply finding food and shelter, as well as medical care for the more than 80,000 injured in these quakes. My colleague Gabe Gutierrez is on the ground in Turkey for us. And Gabe, I know we're after midnight where you are. Every day that goes by, fewer people will be found alive. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that's right, Chuck. Earlier this week, I spoke with one of the rescue workers who said that 5-day window, that was crucial. As you mentioned, that window of opportunity to find these survivors is quickly diminishing. But Chuck, I will tell you, that 17-year-old that you mentioned, that 17-year-old was actually found in this building behind me in the basement. He said he prayed 5 times a day and actually had to shift around in the basement because he could hear the excavator had to protect himself. And certainly that shows just how delicate this rescue operation is, for not just for this 17-year-old, but for so many that we have seen over the past few days. And even earlier today in another town, about an hour and a half from here, Kahramanmaraş, that is actually the epicenter. So much of that town is destroyed, one of 10 major cities across southeastern Turkey that have just been decimated right now. And we spoke with people there on the ground. They are just in shock. We spoke with one woman who said countless friends and family members are still missing. And all this, Chuck, as more international aid is pouring into the region, but it is struggling to get in. So difficult not just to get into parts of southeastern Turkey because of the logistical challenges and the road backups as well, but also, of course, as you know, into northwestern Syria, a country that has been ravaged by civil war for more than a decade, and only the first UN convoys of aid have just started to get into that region. Today, we also learned that the UN says that more than 5 5 million Syrians appear to be homeless now as a result of these earthquakes. It is just devastating all around, Chuck. But again, those moments of unadulterated joy, people being rescued still more than 100 hours after the earthquakes, just like that 17-year-old that was rescued behind me. Young children, including a baby 10 days old, also pulled from the wreckage in another city, Chuck.
Gabe, how well are they, we heard earlier this week that on one hand, obviously, Turkey's emergency services were overwhelmed. On the other hand, sometimes you can have all these people there, but you don't really have enough tools for people to put them to work. How well are operations able to absorb all of this outside help?
Well, Chuck, the enormity of this, you said it. It is just overwhelming to be able to coordinate this type of response, a historic type of response. And yes, we have spoken with displaced residents here on the ground who were frustrated and continue to be frustrated, but were, especially in those first days after the initial earthquake, where they said there didn't seem to be any organized search and rescue effort because they were relying on volunteers at the specialized professional rescue teams that we have now seen from many countries around the world. In the town I was in earlier today, we saw from China, from Russia, we've seen Spanish rescuers. Of course, the 2 search and rescue teams from the U.S. are also here on the ground offering assistance. And they have, of course, these specialized search and rescue dogs that are able to smell and get the scent of possible survivors as well as bodies inside of these sites. And up until now, but to the last few days, the last 2 or 3 days or so, it really hasn't seemed that organized. And Turkey's President Erdogan acknowledged as much just a few days ago when he acknowledged that there were issues at the start of this. However, the challenge is right now is even though there are these search teams from all across the world right here, this is just one site, Chuck. And over the last few days, we have been reporting this is just the scope of this is unreal. And it is so difficult to get not just those teams organized, but right now there don't seem to be enough of them, especially in the southern part of the country closer to the Syrian border, Chuck.
Well, and that's obviously the political strife probably makes that even more difficult as well. Gabe Gutierrez on the ground reporting for us in Turkey. Gabe, thank you. After the break, the NFL honors the doctors who saved Damar Hamlin's life, as his terrifying ordeal highlights an opportunity for change in health protocols, from youth sports to the U.S. military. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. There was a special non-football celebration at the annual NFL Honors last night, honoring the medical workers who were crucial to saving Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin's life after he went into cardiac arrest on the field during a game in Cincinnati last month. All of the staff who played a role in Hamlin's recovery received a standing ovation, including the athletic training teams from both the Bills and the Bengals, who gave him immediate medical attention when he collapsed, as well as Hamlin's long-term cardiac care team from Cincinnati's University Hospital. The Bills trainer who performed CPR on Hamlin also received a vote in the league's MVP race. Hamlin joined the group on stage to pay tribute to their life-saving work. He said that sudden cardiac arrest was nothing he would have chosen to be a part of his story, but that he believes, quote, God's plan was for him to have a greater purpose than the game. And Hamlin's cardiac incident has put the spotlight on the potential to improve life-saving prevention and treatment around sudden cardiac arrests, especially in young people. Some doctors and military family members are pushing for increased scanning for cardiac problems after multiple service members suffered fatal cardiac arrests while on active duty. Our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Cuby, has more.
Pushing the limits was in David Finlayson's DNA.
He was the kind of kid that if you said, don't cross this line, he'd put his foot across to see what would happen.
At 23, he joined the Marine Corps and was sent to Hawaii to serve as an assaultman. He loved being a Marine.
This boy led a charmed life.
Until suddenly, everything changed.
So, it was a Thursday, November 7th, 2013.
David's girlfriend texted Lori saying someone in his unit had died during a run and David wasn't answering his phone. Then a call with her husband delivered the news no parent wants to hear. 2 Marines were at their home.
He just said, they're here. And I said, is it David? And he said, yes. And I said, is he dead? And he said, yes.
It was a sudden cardiac arrest. His autopsy didn't show a heart abnormality, but to Lori's surprise, David never had an electrocardiogram or EKG.
I said, you've got to be kidding. They go through 2 or 3 days of medical testing and you don't check their hearts?
The military stopped giving all recruits EKGs more than 20 years ago, citing unreliable results.
The electrocardiogram that was being used in 2002 is very different from what we're using now.
Dr. Mark Hagney from Uniformed Services University says today's tests are more reliable at finding heart problems among recruits, and it's time to bring them back.
When you take away people being killed from falling off a high structure or jumping out of an airplane, the number one cause of death is heart disease, sudden cardiac death.
As many as 500,000 people are screened for military service every year. Dr. Hagney says on average, 0.5% have potentially serious cardiac issues. That's several thousand people. In 2020, 2 Naval Academy midshipmen died of cardiac disease within weeks of one another. When the superintendent found out an EKG could have identified their heart issues, he had the entire academy screened. Dr. Hagney's team found a number of them with heart problems, including 3 so serious they had to leave the academy. Many conditions have no symptoms and go undiagnosed, but can intensify and suddenly appear with physical exertion, like military training.
It's going to potentially bring out an abnormality that they never would have had a problem with if they were living a much more sedate civilian lives.
Also a danger for young athletes, even those in peak physical condition. But Dr. Hagney warns the stakes are often higher for troops.
If somebody has a cardiac issue in the middle of a mission or flying an airplane in a submarine, it can be a disaster.
Today, Lori is a mom on a mission, creating Lionheart Heroes, working to raise awareness, improve cardiac screening, and add AED machines, portable, easy-to-use defibrillators, to military fitness tests.
In the military, they're always like, you got to keep trying, go, go, go. But if someone goes down, like Damar Hamlin did in the NFL, think hard and start CPR.
Her work already helped Congress pass more screening requirements, and she hopes the military will make AED machines more common.
They're screening for color blindness or flat feet or all kinds of other things, and they need to check their hearts.
Courtney Cubey, the reporter behind the story, joins me next, but we're going to sneak in a commercial break, and then we're going to talk about it. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Fresh from Somalia, Courtney Cubey joins me now to discuss her new reporting on heart testing in the military. And in fact, I remember when right after this happened, you had said, hey, this is an issue inside the military. And frankly, being parochial about this myself, my son plays high school football, and I'm like, hey, we don't get any of this heart stuff. Mm-hmm. And I know you were, obviously the military, I mean, it sounds like if we did better screening of young people, we could at least say, hey, you shouldn't play football and you shouldn't be in the military.
Yeah, it's screening is one piece, but the second piece is just acknowledging that even though you have someone who is young, athletic, healthy, like Damar Hamlin, like David Finlayson, who we profiled in the story there, that doesn't mean that they can't have a cardiac arrest. In the case of David, he had been in the Marine Corps for 2 years. His heart was a little bit bigger. He was a bigger guy. He was an athlete. When he collapsed, the other Marines thought, oh, it's heat stroke, and they threw water on him. He started turning blue. That's when they started CPR. If you can get to these people in the first minute, it's life-saving. If you can get to them in the first 3 minutes, it still could be life-saving, not as many. But that's what we saw with Damar Hamlin. He survived. It was a different kind of cardiac arrest, but the same situation the response had to be the same.
Is the screening process better now, or are we still not there 100%?
They're not there. A couple of the military academies are starting to screen recruits, but what these people are calling for is a screening at MEPS. That's the initial intake for all recruits who come into the military. Every one of them. An EKG takes 5-6 minutes. It's relatively easy to do. It's completely harmless to the patient, and it will give them this baseline. Even if it only identifies a couple thousand people who have problems that need to be monitored, there will be a small subset that this could be a life-saving diagnosis for them. Whereas if they go in the military and they do this physical exertion, it could be it could be a death sentence.
Well, and it could put more people's lives at stake.
Exactly.
If it happens at the wrong time. I mean, that's you're talking about, a time of war.
Yeah.
Or a mission. Look, you're a Pentagon correspondent. Why is the Pentagon being so squirrely about this aerial object they shot down? The way they're briefing is only raising more questions.
And at this point, look, they know they may not know exactly what this thing is or what it was collecting or gathering at this point, because it's only about 24 hours old, a little more than that now, but. They certainly know what it looks like. They know if it looks like another balloon.
You got a tip about this last night?
Earlier today.
Earlier today, yeah.
That there was something that they were watching. What they have to realize is when this happens, there's often a declaration of a national military exercise or something at the airspace.
Yeah.
Well, that gets reported out. People start to learn about that, and then they start asking questions, like us. We start asking questions about it. But they know a lot more than they're saying on this one.
Do you get a sense that this is that basically the Pentagon and the intel community is playing catch-up on this program, and that this probably really did fly under our radar for a few years?
It's hard to say. When you look at something like the one today, for instance, this was flying about the same altitude, about 40,000, maybe a little below, where civilian and military aircraft are flying.
Right.
I find it difficult to believe that if there were balloons like this flying at that altitude, NORAD and NORTHCOM didn't know it. That is one of their primary functions, is monitoring the airspace over North America at that altitude. Right. So I find that difficult to believe. Now, if it's something that was flying at a higher altitude, it's plausible that they didn't know what was going on, but candidly, I find it difficult to believe. They watch these things so closely.
And is it really true that some of these things were classified as UFOs, and now it turns out it may have been the balloons?
So people aren't saying that, but you'll remember that one of the first reports that came out from the DNI about that talked about potential weather balloons.
Yeah.
Could be.
Courtney Cubie, you've been there, Somalia. You are killing it. Nice work.
Thank you.
Still to come, the nation's governors meet with the president at the White House today. Colorado Governor Jared Polis was there and joins me after the break for a one-on-one debrief. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Your state's governors' mansions may have been a little empty this afternoon. 37 state and territorial governors were here in Washington, D.C. today, meeting with President Biden at the White House while they are in town for the annual National Governors Association winter meeting. Speaking to the bipartisan group of governors, President Biden urged them to work across the aisle and press them on implementing the various laws that Congress passed last year. Here's a little bit.
The success that we've already, I think the success for all of us, Democrats and Republicans, is in part going to be measured by not what else we get done or pass, but whether we're able to implement what we've already done. I know it's a problem having to deal with all the money we're sending you. I understand that.
Joining me now on set is one of those governors, Colorado's Democratic Governor Jared Polis. Governor Polis, good to see you.
Good to see you in person, Chuck.
I know you used to have to work here in Washington, so you're visiting.
Glad to be back in Colorado.
Let me start with the meeting at the White House. When the cameras were off, what was the agenda? What was the conversation?
Yeah, so you saw the intro. There's historic federal investment. It's a combination of the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act.
You've never had more federal money to play with, right?
We've never had it. And so I think a common theme from the governors is give us the flexibility to make it work. That really coincides a lot with what the White House wants. They want to see the money be effective in generating change, whether it's around electric vehicle transition, whether it's about building reshoring manufacturing in the CHIPS Act. So there's a natural partnership there where governors are saying, hey, let's be flexible with the guidance so we can make this work. It's different in Delaware and California and Colorado. And I think there's a real commitment from the president to work with the states to make sure we get the maximum bang for our buck.
Well, it does seem as if you've got a ton of money. At what point, when this shuts down, how much harder is it going to be to balance your budgets?
None of this is used to balance our budget. So now, going...
Oh, but money's fungible.
Well, going back, I think that's a good discussion around, for instance, the American Rescue Act funds, which do roll off. And this was more about the Infrastructure Act over the next 10 years, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act. So, in Colorado, we have a record budget surplus. There's a number of states that do, frankly. We have record reserves. In fact, one of the members of the president's administration praised the states on having such high reserve levels. levels. Ours is about 15%. I think they said the average is like 11.5%. So most states are in a very strong fiscal situation right now. Now, we want to thank the American Rescue Act for helping us get there, but these new sources of funds are really transformative funds that we use over a period of time. They don't substitute or replace any part of our state budget.
Let me talk about a couple of things where I think the federal government either has to figure out a solution for you because you guys are fighting each other. One has to do with a regional issue with water and the river and all that stuff. The other has to do with migrants. So let's take on the migrant question. This is turning governors against governors here. Obviously, I know the governor of Illinois wasn't happy with you. What do you want from the federal government right now in dealing with this migrant crisis?
Well, I agree with your framing. First of all, the federal government should step in. I mean, states can't solve immigration. We do the best with what we have. I wish we had the ability to grant work permits. We don't. We don't control the border. So a few things the federal government can do constructively. One is to do temporary protected status for another round of Venezuelans. Most of the new group are Venezuelans. So pending their asylum cases, let's make sure.
So then if they were sent to Denver, you'd keep them?
You know what? It would turn a burden into an asset. We have a workforce shortage. We have 2 job openings for every applicant, every unemployed person. So we need them.
So you'll take some migrants if they want to go to work.
With the permission to work, we would love to have several thousand, without a doubt. Second, of course, secure our borders. That's an ongoing issue. They need congressional action. I don't think that's something the president can do alone. Third, support states and cities that are dealing with asylum seekers. So right now there's some potential pots of money, but there's not a real program that will support the cities and states that want to do this work. The city of Denver in Colorado did some of this work. Over 4,000 people passed through Colorado. We have about 900, mostly Venezuelan immigrants that have decided to move to Colorado. So let's assist the cities and states that want to be part of the solution.
Did that come up in this conversation today?
So I wish we talked more of it. It came up, we did have Secretary Mayorkas there for part of it, and so we brought up again, there's a lot of concern I share about what will happen when Title 42 ends in May, and so making sure that the federal government has a plan. We hope they do. If they do, they haven't shared it fully with us yet, but we've said you need a plan. We want them to vet it with us. We want to make sure it's not what we experienced in December ×5 or ×3. That would be disaster for the country. It would be terrible for the Biden administration.
Let me ask you a little bit about politics. I'm going to ask you a question we asked the idea of a Biden 2024 candidacy. Are you enthusiastic? Are you comfortable? Do you have some reservations, or are you uncomfortable?
Well, look, I mean, the president needs to be the one who says I'm running, and I'll be excited to support him.
So you're enthusiastic?
It's up to him. I'll be enthusiastic if he's enthusiastic.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Why do you say it that way?
Well, only the president can answer the question with Jill. He has a fire in his belly. He's ready to do it. We had a great meeting with him today. And
do you think he's ready to go again?
From my perspective, it sure is.
I mean, if somebody asks you,
him,
hey, Governor, you tell me, you've been with the president. Is he up to the job?
Oh, of course. He's the same Joe Biden we always knew. I knew when he was vice president. He is a class act. He is on the top of his game. There's no question about that.
What do you think he needs to do? Because what's interesting here is Democratic insiders and Washington Democrats, they're pretty comfortable with Joe Biden. The rank and file is a little nervous. What should he have to do for the public to convince the public that he's got the vigor?
It's really talking about some of the accomplishments of the last few years and how they impact people and how they will impact people. I mean, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Act. I mean, what we did with some of the funds for American Rescue Act, remember, it passed through states. So states got a lot of the credit, governors got a lot of the credit. I don't mind the credit, but you know what? Frankly, that was Congress and President Biden that delivered the ability for states to work. We used it for transformational change on affordable housing, on reducing homelessness, on behavioral health support going in. So a lot of big things the Coloradans value, same in all 50 states. But really, I think it's a matter of making sure that people know that, yes, President Biden was a big part of making that happen.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts on the entitlement fights here, which is, look, I know these are very popular programs. Medicare, Medicaid is becoming more popular too, I think, and Social Security. They're not sustainable without some action. What's the right conversation we should be having?
Well, I was a Bull Simpson guy from way back.
Yes, you were, and so was
and President Obama wanted to.
If you tried to do Bull Simpson today, the party would attack you for it.
Well, you don't have to do. I mean, at the time, it wasn't exactly pleasant either. But look, I mean, I think the answer is not to stick your head in the sand. I mean, it's easy to stick your head in the sand in politics. You can do that. You can do it for a year. You can do it for 3 years. But we can't do this forever as a nation. And frankly, it's better to get ahead of it and address this now. Always has to be bipartisan. Either party can demonize the other. So, I mean, neither party
You have to jump off the cliff together.
Yeah, it's not a cliff. In many ways, it's saving these. It's a framing, right? We want to save these programs. They're a value to the American people, right? We want Social Security to be there for people who are paying into it that are in their 30s and 40s today. We want to make sure
But, when a politician says that
for
today, an opponent says, you want to cut Social Security.
Yeah, I think that the answer is you want to save it. I want to save it. I mean, I always did. Again, it's something that people have to do together. It's not based on ideology. It's based on the math, right? And yes, some Republicans do have to get over their ideology. Some of them do not like these programs.
Right.
Okay, set that aside. I think many Republicans do value these programs. We saw President Biden took it to them the other day. So let's work on the math. To Democrats, some of them, frankly, want to expand these programs.
Right.
God bless them. That's their ideology.
But
again, set that aside. Let's talk about actuarial soundness and math, kind of rather than ideology. The only answer is through math, Chuck. It's not through ideology.
You preach there. Math is you can't defeat math. Governor Polis, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Thank you all for being with us this hour. We'll be back Monday. More Meet the Press Now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.